Yes, I want to do that too. And
Okay.
okay. And then those of you who are co-hosts can, of course, unmute yourselves when it's time. So this is talking about where poems begin. It says one can begin with an everyday event. A dropped handkerchief can be for the poet the lever with which to move an entire universe. It is well known how much an apple's fall meant to Newton when he saw it, and that scholar can thus be called a poet. That is why the poet today scorns no movement in nature, and his or her mind pursues discovery just as much in the most vast and evasive syntheses, crowds, nebulae, oceans, nations, as in apparently simple facts. A hand which searches a pocket, a match which lights by scratching, the cries of animals, the odor of gardens after rain, a flame which is born on the hearth. Poets are not simply devoted to the beautiful, they are also and especially devoted to truth, insofar as the unknown can be penetrated so much that the unexpected, the surprising, is one of the principal sources of poetry. And who would dare say that for those who are worthy of joy, what is new is not beautiful? Others will soon busy themselves about discrediting this sublime novelty, after which it can enter the domain of reason, but only within those limits in which the poets, the dispensers of the true and the beautiful, have advanced it. The poet, by the very nature of exploration, is isolated in the new world into which he enters. The first and the only consolation which is left to him is that, since we must live in the end by truths in spite of the falsehoods, which are certainly among us, the poet alone sustains the life whereby humanity finds these truths. This is why modern poets are above all singers of a constantly new truth, and their task is infinite. They have surprised you and will surprise you again. That's Guillaume Apollinaire from L'Esprit Nouveau et les Poètes, or the New Spirit and the Poets. And I think it includes both of the poets you're about to hear tonight. And I believe Rachel is reading first tonight according to the coin flip. So, Rachel.
Unmute. It's a pleasure. It's a great pleasure to read with Norman. It was a tremendous pleasure to be published by CHAX. What can I say? And it's a pleasure to see everybody here and to greet people who might be listening later, on whatever recording has been pressed at the right moment. I chose to do this reading only from the selected poems. And I want to use it to give a little sense of the modes and themes of my work, but it means you could just about start anywhere and do anything. So I would like to start at the back of the book with Days and Works, which is a curious book. It looks like this, and it was published by Asada and never distributed particularly. So if anybody is interested enough to want a copy, write to me and we can work something out, because I have a lot of copies. That said, and of course, by the end of the reading, I hope people are so moved by what we did to support CHAX and to support the world happiness by buying a book or two. Okay. Accept the desire to puncture the page, maybe with a penetrating all created by a capital I, with its specific pinhole or pinholed of light. There would be nothing to say if we did not have these languages with their imperfect pile of pronouns. Creation and boson pulse would surge and furl, but who would know? Who would care? Who would ask? Who would interpret or delight? A monument to any day where nothing particularly happens, That's the way it is. This is a quotation. It's the perfect situation of factors, he said, that came together to make a real big mess for us. But it's all in how the nothing gets told, the tilling and tolling, the toll. The days go slow and fast. I'm totally out of phase. Don't sleep at night, don't work the day, just rocketing around in flesh. It's still raining, or it's still snowing, or it's unreasonably sunny. In drought, unequal distribution being a problem. How can so many things occupy the same space? It actually should probably be something like, how can so many things occupy the same space? The next thing I'm going to read, and it doesn't really have, the reading doesn't have a tonal unity, let's just put it that way, is from Graphic Novella, which is this. It's a big book, and I keep on doing this wrong. It's made of clippings from newspaper and newsprint. It's in the genre of trash book, which is not a negative. And it also wants to talk about the news, not the new. It's that world that Charles was referring to, the world that isn't truth, that's bothering me. Dear reader, hello. Here's what I want to say right now. I tried to make collage by clipping odd bits of paper and ribbon, string and textile, cardboard and tissue, and rearranging them, juxtaposing them as new units of the real, joining them up together to make attentive, attractive, odd, and interesting combinations. Good glue, a sense of dynamism, irony, charm, sweet design choices, and an avowal of the fundamentals. Selection and combination, connotation and denotation, styles and ruptures, allusions, fabrications, all the basics of making. Something enjoyable to struggle with and to look at, something to wonder at. Yes, they were supposed to be aesthetically pleasing. Yeah, I know, all of that. Now, here's how the plan turned out. It was black and white. I wasn't scavenging interesting shapes, paper scraps, and printed matter at random. Instead, I kept on finding pictures of watches and cameras. Perhaps these are good mid-range commodities now advertising in the places I happened to be looking. In fact, I cannot believe a person needs that many watches. Only watching. But I am out of step, which will bring me to the legs. I saw headlines, news stories, and made unesthetic clippings of words, some cars. Perhaps watches and cameras and vehicles with headlights were good because they would reproduce in black and white and make a useful, stark power image with high-end touches. Each commodity had its glassy, impervious side, was powerful in being enlarged. Seen in a certain light, each, with its size, its isolation, is even accusatory. It accuses you of not wanting it enough, and it does not actually care about you, despite your wanting it to take a picture of someone you love. It wants you hit and run over by it. It is larger than you think and stronger. Your desires have been reorganized. You thought you were a person. Turns out you're a set of organic targets for colonizing. Your stomach, your stubbornness, your feet, your foolishness, your vulva, your volition, your hair, your here, your intestines, your intensities, your mouth, your mirth, your skin, your skill, your penis, your pensiveness, your joints, your joy, your ears, your eras, your underarms, your understanding, your anus, your earnestness, your wrist, your rest, your heart, your hurt, your finger and toenails, your nom de guerre, all taken over. And in some unknown measure, your brain. In some measure, the dizzying and haptic desires, hearing, seeing, smelling, touching, are given over. Your desire will be only for it. This goes up to and through your final illness, your final days, from your birth, radiating outward, from your birth, radiating outward, name, organization. You are already dead insofar as you are now dissolved and segmented, chopped and divided, pinpointed and targeted, followed and managed, pumped up and reanimated, force-fed oxygen, hooked up to, yes, of course they are useful, apps, found the wee little X of you on world maps. As a person, you are solely cellular pulsations and organs that can be deployed sometimes against their host. That would be you and me. Collage. What the author thought she wanted and what happened are so disparate as to constitute a case. These things, these images in the book, rarely combined. They rarely actually collaged. The aesthetic was in the trash bin. I ended up with strange exemplary pictures or some very unpleasant image details on pages. These were like illustrations for a book that is missing, or like incipient initials without articulating the useful letter of the alphabet. They ended up as a scrapbook, a slideshow, old photographs, in the meantime overrun by desperate poems or parts of poems. Anecdotes that someone told me, an array of horizontal soundings, this is a contradiction, put out there, here, along with some odd, rough cut bits of black and white pasted down on any given page. That was, I venture to say, in response to this, poetics, that not all my collages are like that. In fact, not the fragmentation of graphic novella is really like a set of glyphs about, it's a poem including history, so to speak. That was 2. Number 3. Okay, the first thing I'm going to read that starts to state, like, what are we doing? And the fact that, as somebody recently told me, I'm not very self-same. That is, a lot of my things don't have the same style or anything. And I do wonder at that. So this is Ledger 23 from the book Interstices, which is published by Subpress. It's a book of letters and ledgers. Ledger 23. Oh, Charette, we'll make a plan. We will. Sketchline envelopments and distinctions, quick lines flashing intensively, bright, wide, scrappy butterfly as the page modeled camouflaged and thick with powdery color that makes for flight, these elements will enter into plan. Something that unfixed alphabets, turning ABCs to numbers, then decoded other, further, secret words to be read hungrily by waxen, flickering light. These are hid within the plan. Enveloping any body in female iridescence, dialectical wonder with one red bindi light to bring the extra eye gland into center are some activities included in this plan. An effeminate poetry, florid, decaying, decoying, coy, and blurry, taking my own breath away, muzzy and moseying with marvelous and distractible motion. This type will be encouraged in the plan. Mixed clarities of intense ambiguity and utopian longing are equally decisive to the plan. Whoever stepped into light, wet night, who slipped through alphabets, the ones en charrette, the ones working overtime who realize that design processes cannot resolve everything, become nostalgic for the thought there could be plan. This plan is splitting. There are blueprints and palimpsests. There are transparencies over other scribbled pages, storyboards. The plans multiply and proliferate. They are situational and garrulous, close-mouthed, various, and so on. This seems actually to be the plan. Also in interstices, the letters are mixed up, but many of them address people, but they don't necessarily address the people with that same initial letter, except mainly if I say R, I generally mean me. Letter 9. Dear R, and here's another other alphabet. Leap into your excess and compound the crisis. Deepen it. It's language talking through itself to the void then, in which this all takes shape. You, the tube from end to end for echoing. Language wants language. It uses us. It might as well. But agency is ours to tell. This is an endless process of turning inside out and reaching back. Alimentary, my dear R. The whole story of creation is a displacement, a mystification from actual human fabrication. Thus, stolen wages built this state. The cadence of a slogan helps make do with this cross-hatched system, for still the objects made stare back. It is their aura, which is our labor once removed, that makes us weep, and weep surprised until all dry of tears, but not of care. That was letter 9, and it's all in this book. It's all in this book. Okay. It's typical of these readings, by the way, that while you time it, you have no idea when you started. I'm just saying. Okay, this is a draft. I'm now entering drafts. It's draft 107, meant to say. I'm actually doing a little teeny cut, as if you, those of you who are following the text. And there also something happens at the end that may or may not work. Draft 107, meant to say. Meant only to list one and one and one, wonder. But found I needed verbs, and then I needed time. Meant to know the heavy doors whose weight, without having been there, one can only pretend to intuit. Meant to erase half the words or more, but couldn't bring myself to do it. Wanted to know about making art and telling the truth. Why this engineered apple tastes dull? How did we get here? And did we decide to? Or else what flood of slough drowned us where we stood? Meant to make the stitches more overt, patches and their overlap, but aesthetically. Meant to sketch every day and thus note more, much more, so far away from what is called the center, it might as well be here. Question. Looking back, what did you learn? Answer. What a small amount of metal it takes to kill you. Meant to say, cost that out. It isn't as if this thought had gotten nowhere. Conjunctures of intensity play out as dispersion. So meant to make a poetics, the way people do, but it never included everything I wanted. Meant to take webbed strings and watch small articulations, meant more mystery and more humility. What I meant might have been more saturated in the understanding of paralysis. Meant to write biographies of obscure objects and their provenance. What is beyond the sublime? What beyond the old poems with their alarming preponderance of white marble and green travertine? Meant to have spelled Dingedicht correctly, but didn't. A list of unaccountable items, totally yours. Some are lost, others list, awake of themselves. They send as much forward as they can, but I saw that file only in shreds, meant to get more from it. Meant to mention the poem is always in motion, always moving away is what I meant to say. What I meant was some painful, almost implausible point between being abandoned and what? Assumed into our humanness? This whole era has lived in denial, affirming or sanctioning genocide and destruction, meant to say what now? Who is the intermediary for what? I meant to notice. I meant to create the kind of beauty that was not beautiful in the way I did not want. This left me without much of what I was once meant to do, so had to change my mind. Meant to keep better records, meant to ask more questions, coming from time, webbed further in time, to get singed, torn, used up, wrangling. That's what I meant. What does the characteristic feeling of debris and twisted twisting actually say? I meant to start and to startle myself. It was so. Trample the vanity of the poem. Do you need this piece of string? I saved it for you, for the knot and length to work on, under, over, twist, and let it hold, so you could weave it in the webbing that you keep too. It is your archive as well as mine, this little piece of nothing, this part of the imaginary whole. Would it have helped to be less careful or more? I would have liked to understand the choice better, meant to. Should there be fewer moments of the heightening of art? I meant a greater ambivalence, meant to keep on saying, what do you do this for? And meant to stay in the ungainly spot where too little and too much struggle in it between an open fright. Meant to finish. Now it is not clear what I meant or what I mean by that, but readiness is right. I meant to let the poem pass into its particular autism, a compound paralysis of overloaded desires. Can one overcome one's own cowardice? Meant to ask this. Plastic no longer means malleable. It means a voluminous tax on the ocean. Trample the vanity of the poem. It is a smudge on the page. If nothing more could walk between the lines, the words I've found made other words their interlocutors. Here's the twisted key. What kind of an event is this? Shouldn't all writing be utopian, but also plausible? The failures are ethical, they are rhetorical, they are political. What aren't they? Yet, how could I limit the call I'd made? Ring the bell. Sorry, I knew that was going to happen. Ring the bell again. This thing is the only poem you'll ever need, but you'll need it no matter who writes it, over and over. I'm going to read one more draft and shorter. And since I didn't time it, if Norman wants to weigh in on whether I could read another page, let him. This one is called Draft 64 /. And all the poems on this line, I can't remember which one it is, but anyway, it's all about I / yeah. So you'll see. It's, I guess, my version of the autobiographical. Draft 64 /. The poem is the fosse in which to cower, hunching down by warehouses of power. A sludge-filled ditch where futurists once lay, now backwashed debris, now box store splay. Turbines process hot things and then distribute them, but nothing is what you want. Things no one sees on always-on TVs, not fake, but not, as it happens, unprofitable. Lemmings running on the take. So my throat opened like a snake's throat when it faces down its natural food hiding in twigs. And my eyes opened wider, swept by headlights, fast drivers in fat cars. But I could not strike, nor take in all that I saw. I had poisoned nothing, hurt nothing by myself, if ever there were such a thing that had a choice apart from strings of stringent, stinging links that I could barely bring myself to know, standing uneven, aslant in the street. Like the corner mutterer covered with a quilt, bloated with poisonous fill, although my electric other selves did damage where they found they could, all in my Sealy name, slash, slash. It was too much to be therefore so close to overcome. I could not I could not do one step at a time, or at least I had to step on many paths at once with too few feet to go around. Content, transfer, encoding, quoted, printable, blank, Rachel. I just wanted to let you know by writing this that I too am a stranger in these tangled corridors of strangeness, threaded through the buried graffiti and strata. Prussian blue over burnt umber, a glyph of the 20th century. So far, this one too. I limp the maze where other shivering walkers went, the hurt, the halt, the broken. I imp there, am a particular shadow or third beside them in a classical cadence, foregrounded by the habit of hearkening back to what we know, some idea that's so consoling. But I am leaning, I am propped, I am fractured. This is not walking, but a shuffled drag. I am trying to walk in the world as it is, but all the weights and balances are off, sides and listed, the whole range of scales, tilts, visionary ankle twisted trail when I am in this real world pulling a concrete plug or slug, myself, whatever it was, snapped when I put one heavy-hearted foot down on the concrete one rancid day of mist or mist. I surely need to learn to walk again mindfully where it is necessary to go. There was ripped cloth and a hollow ring of bone dissolved into a raining snow of my own body, falling slowly, swirls and clumps. And I didn't want to know. There was nothing I got that I had wanted yet. A little fuzz or droplet indicates its place. There was no solution to continuing to want except continuing. Wind rain of a shallow day, hot fix, but the firewall is, as stated, temporary. So far, there is no fix lasting longer. There is nothing more to say. And so I haunt the spot I once was riding, under the road, under the mall, under the state, under everything, strata, engorged and fattening shelves. Ghost. Yes, ghost. This one not complex. Just the shadow aisle of sunken hope and text. Make that the end. Thanks.
So you said you might want one more page?
I'll do it after Norman and Norman can do one after me.
Okay. Then I'm going to break into the middle here just a minute to say when Norman is finished and Rachel's done another page and Norman's done another. We will have 10 to 15 minutes of question and answer. And because there are 4 screens of people here, that will be a little complicated. I will unmute or allow you to unmute yourselves, and I will try to flow through the 4 different screens and see if people are aching to ask questions. And we'll just do the best we can to get through that. But right now, I would love to hear from Norman Fischer.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Charles. Rachel, that was great. That was really great. And I'm really happy to be reading with you tonight. And I hope that we're going to do it again in person so that we can really be in the same room together. I want to thank all of you for coming and giving us your attention, but especially I want to thank Charles for CHAX, for being what CHAX has been for so long to so many poets. It's hard to imagine the landscape of contemporary poetry around here without Charles and without CHAX. So I'm really grateful. I'm very pleased to be a CHAX poet. And also, this is the cover of my selected poems, 1980 to 2013. Since 2013, I've done much more writing. So I'm hoping for volume 2 of the selected poems one of these days. But this goes up to 2013. This is a photograph. I used to have a bunch of Buddhist nuns from Korea would come and visit me every year. And this is a photograph of these Korean nuns on the hill above our house overlooking the ocean. So I'm going to just go through. I have about 30 minutes, I think, and I'm going to go through and read from early work through, I don't know how far I'll get, but before I do that, I want to thank Denise Newman and Monica Heredia, who are both here, I think. I am really bad at retrospection. I'm just not interested, and so I would never have been able to select poems from my own works. I would not have had the patience. And Denise and Monica selected these poems. So I didn't question them. They selected them. I said, great. And that was it. So I'm grateful to them. This would not have happened without Denise and Monica. This is from, these are a couple of poems from the 70s from my first book, Like a Walk Through a Park, which was published in 1980. Palm Sunday Sonnet. Gladiola stately red. Our task is more than we can bear. To know of fashions, not to see the dismal stars overhead. Yet, bleeding, our mind's eyes total beer among grapes and hyacinths. The clear day never dawns aright, till Zeus's statue cleanest washed, alas, not let us never cease to search for purity in the sky, where all clear sights of fashion red, to bleed our task to what we bear. The gladiola stately red, the dismal stars overhead. Easter Sonnet. The Easter lily opens fully upon the wicker basket of your heart. At this dark springtime's passions flowering, what crucible anoints alack? Pursuing the garden steps alight, brick walls of our longing, our believing, all our melancholy fences, our heart's most dirged rock and strap. The essential fragrance of hearts alighting upon the last tempted dark of your personal night. The Easter lily lends its fragrance. The garden opens to a sigh. April 12th, 13th. Later and later, let me be in it. In it, not further, let me later be. In further and later, let me be in it. Is it not in it further and later? Let me further be in it. Later and later in, is it not in it? Let me be in. Let me be in it later and further. Is it not in it later and later? Later and later, in it not further be. Let me be in it. Let me later be. And then this is from a 1987 book, the Devices, which actually was, I think, a kind of imitation of Ted Berrigan's classic book, The Sonnets, where I use a lot of the same techniques that Ted used in the sonnets, but these are not sonnets. So I'm going to read a few of these. Number 23. There is nothing that is born, no entrance to an ample circularity, dangle, then nothing touching. Certainly the lost in the ooze of sticking to the point stance or a particular breathing pattern in whirls she saw there. And Jane, whatever, when you approach her, steam complexity, and she was confused by Jane breathing in. She knows a person who is really settled has gents, what is, looking at her fingertips, and barn swallow nesting in barn roof. 26. Now the physical power of thought, which were notion of multitudinous thing, proceed to know the means and conduct which characterizes the creaking of the table when the floor shifts. The fact of the matter is that there is a little bit of personality in everyone, two kinds of view. One, you are after my job, or two, that I stand to make a lot of money on this. But after all, art becomes a business. Self-nature is unobtainable. And that's for Alan Davies. 38. Margaret, are you weeping or grieving or not knowing why? Your quiet room betokens independent, brief varieties of simple wisdom. Doing many larger things can't give us a sense of place, a sense of peace, Doing many larger things can't give us a sense of peace, fills it, these hallowed hallways and trees. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Isn't it marvelous, these simple things, and how true the picture of it is? To wake up, shut up, and sit down is not a disgrace and involves everyone. And two, this magnificent, burning moon. And that one's for Philip Whalen. 47. I do not belong to the school of causation or the school of no causation. Not today. If he had invented things that made black and white over more, and if it rings so made as many clash over it as her throat trembles this time, and this question and this answer of them, there are all of them left to them, one of them, and there are all of them left to him, making fatigue out of less, or the trees are in their autumn beauty, the woodland paths are dry, the world does shine, all green and sunlight every which way. And that one's for Ron Sullivan. So now I'm in another book later on. This one is precisely the point being made, which was published in 1993. And this is called The Body. The body is nothing but the tendency or the fact of being affected physically. Otherwise than this, there is nothing to be called body besides the fact of the saying itself. There is affecting physically, and the further projection of that which is affected, which is not what we mean by body. Feelings and conceptions project a substance into mind, but in reality, what is behind the substance is only the activity of feelings and conceptions that occurs in this instance. In reality is a phrase whose referent is a specific problem of human thought or language. Thought's reflection back on itself gives rise to this problem, which amounts to the discrimination of various categories, also without anything beyond themselves to refer to. Cities, streets, teeming with actual people. Each thought affects the body physically, whether close in or at a distance, whether of one's own accord or another's. Hence, get the words right, but not in the usual way. The world is constructed of everything that is not the case. The body is that which is troubled, struck, oppressed, molested, carried off, violated, defiled, broken up. You are prey to your body. Conceptions are applied as glue to the world to make of things negations and outer shape. When the lion roars, mice seek their holes, waterfowl leap into ponds, deer bolt for cover, elephants break their tethers, evacuate their bowels, and run off. We imagine we touch this shape, although what we actually touch is frustration. The body is affected by touch of cold and heat, of hunger and thirst, gnats, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and snakes. People impute character onto their tergiversations and get pain thereby. Names dictate us. That's literature. To name the present would unleash a terrifying amount of force. That's literature. We name the present world in act unconscious, in intention following the blazing shapes. To speak of this redeems night, waves breaking on the shores of calm. Harm done and scream, to patiently accept is to alter at least cost. This is always an advantage. Why be unhappy about something if it can be remedied? And what is the use of being unhappy about something if it cannot be remedied? The body leads on. And that is for Barrett Watton and after Barrett Watton. I think Barrett is here and recognizes his words, I think, in that poem. The audience. I have it in mind to produce an effect that will occasion response, and then various factors, again, fondly for aggrandizement. You will tell me these things so as to make a heap out of me. This room, very quietly now, only the very slight quiver of thought. You want to get away from it, either temporarily or permanently, but there's nowhere to go where it isn't. You want total control over everything, but you already are control right where you stand by the chair, which is so obscure, standing there, mute, four-legged, contentious. Is all this amounting to something of an insult? The whole body. Am I reaching you, and are you reaching me? Are you touching the carved recesses, the dark grained and polished wood, the sense of gravity, confusion's ballast, fruit of location, which also did not listen? These are the principles, the method equally clear, the result, according to the latest surveys, indicates everything's working out as it ought. Our productions producing results at peak performance, everyone falling precisely into line with the various presents and prizes tucked neatly under their arms. They want to be entertained, even shocked into a moment of false and pitiful self-knowledge that will alleviate the disease that comes from an articulate, precise, yet substantially incomplete knowledge. The milk of human kindness. And now I might still be in the same book or another book, I'm not sure, but this one is called Arbitrary Subjects. Each time is news, not about what happened, but about what didn't. Something I am writing about, I don't know about, that doesn't even appear in the lines. Can't stop telling about that. A single hair pokes holes in everything, an eyeball sees through intensity, mainly seeing, but also thinking, the sort of thinking that floats like a cloud in a big blue sky, pulling apart and reforming noisily. One treetop lit in morning's light, a whole mountain of trees remain in dim. Let's start over again. In an enthusiasm of dejection, build new lexicons to put the world together in a disconstruction. But this time, without the ghost that always rummages for answers. Just the questions will do fine. Each one stands for a different animal. There's an advantage in not knowing the names for anything. And there's an advantage. And that one is for Charles Bernstein. This is from precisely the point being made, another 1993 book, or it's the same book, I'm a little mixed up, but anyway. Poem beginning with a line from Clark Coolidge. But the sea, like the mind, owns no lid. It is clear and knowing, I'm looking at the time, it is clear and knowing, but never dwindles. Waves wave, foam and air in fury of froth going forth where there is burial of regiment, articulation. It is only the going, the stain, frequent. I, a single person, can be found there weeping. There's this sort of problem about engraving. Also the age. About the age also, less to tell than to quarrel with. And even this, no more, but in crowds of print. Huge swells, fearful winds and billows. A concurrent, frequent, coherent image to which our little boat attaches, makes of time an inherent situation, an intention wanting direction it can speak with soothingly. That is why this table is here. For. That is why You should choose a number and wait, making it smooth so that you can take your place there in the chair next to the table. The table and the chair there. The table frequently there. The chair devastatingly clear. The chair frequently devastating. The analogous, etc., to the table. The chair, etc., the chair. The table condensed to an enigma. The table blended into the chair, which sat on, then systematically disappears. Then, without a sitter, perplexingly frequent, the chair undistinguished, unable to bear fruit, frequently perplexed, systematically defiant. The chair looks like hair finally, hair blowing in an ocean of heart. Heart wants ears to beat the boat with frequently, devastated and panicked in an aura of sight. Eye and chair at bottom like a sigh. You cannot really know why. The storm may come, the foam fly, the boat all silver and blue under the sky, or in the sky, no matter how close to it you get, is not there. I come close to hearing. I come close to seeing. I come close to smelling. I come close to tasting. I come close to feeling. Think I have thought, but cannot be sure. Now, a few from my 2000 book called Success. It's called Success because my father gave me a diary, you know, like you write in what you're going to do every day. And it had dates on top of every page and 28 lines, blank lines. And on the front, it said Success because it was Success Diary Company for like business people to write their diary in. So I wrote it, I filled it up with poems and I called it Success. And there were 365 28-line poems. And this book, Success, is a selection from that 365 poems. Thursday, 17 April. Hike to the top of Vernal Falls, as we did 14 years before, in the rain and mist up the steep stone stairs, now with our children, who weren't then, scampering up gleefully as we lagged behind, and looking out at cliff and snow and tree, sopping wet and amazed. The big, thick ponderosa pines, bark all yellow-brown, symmetrically scored on the trail to Happy Isles. Such noble beings as we could never be, quiet and massively simple. The pinkish, clear forest floor, so still, not much to contend for here and not much life, just enough. As a tributary of the Merced gushes by this early spring for this place, where you can see the shocking rosebuds, all purple and spiky in bloom, or the bright red snowflower poking up among the expressionless conifers, the dogwood in bloom at exactly this moment, some white flowers full open and some still as tiny, lively points of dazzling green on the graceful limbs leaning at angles to the bigger pines and firs. At the top of the falls and the loud blasts of spray, a manzanita and a laurel low to the ground in a rock. Saturday, 23 June. Thought, not experiences. Or is it experiences, not thoughts and words? Are experiences not thoughts? Or are thoughts that are experienced as meanings pure experience beyond words? Could there be such a thing? Could there be ocean without waves, or waves without ocean? And could I now be elsewhere than here at any other time? No one reads poetry, or at least no one reads my poetry, not even me. And there is a reason for this. And it is that it would be impossible for anyone to read what is written. They are only reading air somewhere other than here, where the needle point of reality pierces the interstices of the poem. But this is not the poem. Thursday, 6 September. Saying goodbye to Isan, looking stiff, formal, and waxy, like statue of a Zen master. In white kimono, brown rakusu, hands crossed, lying in bed, dead. Light wind blowing in, stirring curtains. Sunny afternoon. I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and the body of one's self and another, not too empty, and I vow with all beings to attain unsurpassable liberation, and gone completely, utterly gone, are some of the things I said on my beads as a way to say goodbye to old friend, good monk, who demonstrated it's mysterious and there's no way to do it. Why? What? Everything. At least twice, according to Philip. And survive. 57 years anyway. Somehow get along without his dingy, who knows what, cockeyed attitude and acceptance of anything intolerable, even making it worse and loving it and managing to redeem it all. Now resting quiet, complete. I also confused about time. I'm okay for a little bit more. Who's going to say no, right? Nobody's going to say no. Anyway, I'll read a little bit more. I want to read, I'm looking at Pierre Juris right in front of me on the screen. And these poems, this is from a book, I Was Blown Back, 2005. And these poems were deeply influenced by Pierre's work on Ceylon. It just blew me away, and I was obsessed with it for quite a long time. And these poems came out of that obsession. I think they're exactly like Ceylon, not as good, of course, but exactly like Ceylon. But I'm sure they're nothing like Ceylon at all.
Looks like Norman is lost.
Looks like he's frozen, and I don't know if he can hear us to know that might.
No, I'm sure he can't. So somebody should call him. If you have a number for him. If you don't have a number, I don't have one handy.
I don't have a number. I can try.
Hold on, let me look, see if I have a number. I think it's unlikely.
Is this an obscure taboo?
Sorry?
Is it an obscure taboo that Norman froze right when he was about to read Ceylon poems?
Possibly. Let me see.
I'm thinking not.
I have a number for him. I can call him.
Why don't you do that, would you?
Yes.
Or even just
Oh,
text
he's
him.
not, Bob is calling him and he says he's not answering.
Yeah, he thinks he's in the middle of
Or
reading.
text him. Oh, well.
Hmm.
I called him and
Interesting that you isolate your,
it
you
didn't
isolate.
get through, so.
I'm back. Sorry about that. I have no
there it
idea.
is.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm back.
You were just starting to do the salon poems.
Yeah. Okay, I was in the middle of a poem. So I don't know. I have no idea what happened. Was that something that happened on your end or was it me? Do you know?
I don't
No,
know.
You were all there. You were all there. I just
I know it sometimes happens that someone freezes up, and it's probably a connection issue.
all right. Well, never mind. I'll keep going.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So I'll a thousand people contained within a lit square. 3 trees silhouetted straight up, branching eerily out. Ordinary clouds stream against the fluted airways. How their smoky fingers make music against the dark. Quietly, what's good descends like dust or dusk onto the milky landscapes. The people stand still, and all around them, the bluster of their thinking pulls down lightning from above, and the platforms rattle. The owls in the trees scatter their nocturnal alarms. How decisive the universal defeat. In eyes, it's kind of eyes. In eyes, words spill. Thought dissolves in water, unstable, overflowing its lips, lapping quiet out beyond the breakers. There's casting up of weight in this well, so that looking into the depths, there's no contact outside the sheer warmth that is there. A presence in the larger vicinity is imminent collision, a force pressing over you unannounced, of memory as far back as the beginning, carried along in the effortless floating. Sky and sea sketch out an edge that you reach for with your hand, making mere gestures within the sound of words. Waves sound like tinkling glass on the beaches. My eyes cupped with light, so deep back, there's no connecting, no escape. How hard I work to open locks for which there seem to be no keys. Stranded here as usual beside the pump, where the social body blunders on in the forced march of its deceptions toward a lurching, just maybe possible dream that seems to saturate my soul like starch in a shirt, but always comes to nothing when I can't wake up. No matter how hard I try to assign myself to something, I keep floating free in chunks, always elusively elsewhere, which turns out to be a newer version of the same thing, but in different words. So I can never get used to the feeling of what I am. Still, planes take off into sky, the way you imagine something that might occur tomorrow that won't quit once you start in on it, nor blow up properly when the fuse is lit, giving life that razor's edge quality. And I think maybe one more brief piece, okay? I'll finish with this. This is from, I think, 2012. Rachel was well into the 2000s. I barely made it into the 2000s here. But this is from 2012. It's The Strugglers. And it's got a long prose work in it called 65. And it's 65 paragraphs written in memory of my friend, Rabbi Alan Liu, who died at the age of 65 in 2009. And so this was written not long after his death. "35. A symbolic system engages me with the ultimate conditions of my existence. A set of notes, metaphors, rituals, and rules. I used to like it, but now I don't. I used to be one, but now I am many. I used to be you, but now I am me. Then I fell when the sun melted my wings, plunged into the sea, and the farmer wiped his brow. The dray horses plowed on. The little girl drank cream and brushed her hair away from her eyes. The world rolled on." 36. The need to know, or at least imagine. How have dealings with you if I don't know who you are and who I am and what we are dealing in? It seems to be insufficient simply to get through the day. Does utilitarian individualism free us from bondage? Which is what? To what? Finishing the hat. How does the smoking mountain play out its drama, if not through force of sound, melody of demanding words? Do this, don't do that. Is love the drama implied in wine and bread, lilies of the field? Lay down the law in both senses. Sigh and move on, or fight and gasp till you drop. It comes at the end of an era that the one you love is canceled. The feeling of losing everything is worse than it seems. Even the landscape weeps for want of meaning. It needs a reason to bloom. Wonderful. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it very, very much.
And that was wonderful. Thank you. And I think Rachel perhaps wanted another page, or
I think that was an illusion, and Norman would probably be the best commentator on that desire. I think it would be much more fun and more interesting to try to talk with all of the people here if they actually wanted to ask a question that, or make a comment that might lead to comments. I don't know, maybe I'm nostalgic for the classroom.
Well, you know, Charles Alexander didn't say this before, but if you go to the button on the bottom that says reactions. If you click on that button, there's a little button that says raise hand. It's a bar across the bottom. If you click on that, your hand will raise and you'll pop up to the top of the screen like Nick Fischer's hand has been raised, and he's right there. So that makes it very organized way of being able to see who's got something to say. And then we can easily be able to see them. And like I see, there's
Wow.
like Nick Fischer and Paul Klinger and May Shu and Joe Safdie and Tom Mandel. And so we're, okay, Charles, can I do that? Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, so go ahead, Nick.
And I think you can all unmute yourselves if you want to too now.
Yeah, you have to unmute yourself, Nick, in order to speak. Yeah.
Thank you so much, both of you. I really feel blessed to be with you guys tonight. It was beautiful. The question for you both, and Norm, and you've both been very generous, so it could be a yes or no, if need be. But Norman, I've been reading a little bit on your words on imagination, and not to paraphrase you too horribly, but I remember you closing with that imagination, if cultivated and fostered, would bring humanity towards a more noble future. Forgive me that. Would you equate that then to fostering imagination as a moral imperative, if such a thing were to exist, both in individually and societally? And again, yes or no would be great. Thanks.
Yes, I would. Yes.
You want to answer that too, Rachel?
No.
Okay.
We're off and running. This is good.
Okay.
Oh.
I'm going to just call the people in order of hands
Yeah,
up.
yeah. Can you see him? Charles, you can see him, right?
Yeah, I think the next one is Don Pendergast.
No, Paul
Paul.
Klinger.
Oh,
I'm Paul Klinger's wife.
yeah.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
And I actually had and hi, Rachel. I haven't actually seen you face to face, even though I've published your work, but I was wondering what your dad did.
My father?
No, Norman's
No,
father.
no.
My father.
Yeah, you met
What
him
you mean? What work he did? What is
third
that?
or
What you
fourth.
mean? Well, my father, most of his life, he was a foreman in a factory that manufactured snowsuits for little children. That's mostly what he did. And after that factory collapsed, he was unemployed for a long time, which was really very bad.
Okay.
And then he got a job as a debit insurance agent, which meant that he went around knocking on people's doors and saying, will you pay your $6.95 insurance so your policy won't collapse on you?
Mm.
That's what he did.
Okay.
Why did you ask that question? That's such a bizarre question.
You referenced it at the top of the third or fourth Pullman.
Oh, I did? Oh,
Mhm.
I don't remember that.
And next at this illustrious lineup is Mei Xu.
Hi, Norman and Rachel. I'm a stranger here, so I don't read poetry. Sorry. I guess why? Because I don't know. I think when I was very little, I want to write. I write something like this, but now I'm like, whoa. I feel like you bring back to me when I was a very, very little girl. It's really bizarre right now, I feel. But recently I have some things about language. So I hear, Rachel, you said language needs language or whatever. I can't remember. And then Norman, you said a chair became a hair, and then wow, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. And then I'm saying, this language, to me, is because I have very complicated mind. So so language to me is belief system. It's belief system. So this poetry is another world, have the rules, I assume, and is another system, you build upon that, or you use this to construct this another belief system, or this is simply, Norman, you're dropping your body and mind.
Rachel, you want to start? You want to say something first?
I'm not sure I got all of the question. Poetry, you don't have to apologize for not reading poetry. Just read it, or don't, meaning it's just word after word, but it has certain conventions that have been built up, which many people here would actually quarrel with. So it's words put in a certain way. And a lot of people in this group would, I think, argue with a special aura that's given to poetry. And yet we also use that aura. So it's a very paradoxical genre, or a mode of practice, to better. And that's all that I have to say. And it's one of your questions is, why don't I write poetry anymore? And the other question seems to be, why am I so tempted by poetry? And therefore, it's a contradiction that needs to be struggled with as if you were asking each other the questions. You might think of writing a dialogue or something between those two points of view. But the question is so complicated, as you say, your mind is complicated, that's about the best that I can do in this situation. Thank you.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that, May, but I know that May works in high tech at a very high level, artificial intelligence, right? And so language, so that's working with language, a kind of very complex language. And I guess the thing is that words, anyway, as far as I can tell, they always have some emotional valence. There's some, in a way that abstract language, like computer languages, don't have emotion. You can't, even if you're not wanting to emphasize the emotionality of words, every word has a feeling to it. So in poetry, as Rachel said, is a very specialized and different use of language. So anyway, it's an endless question that you're raising, and I appreciate it. And thank you for coming tonight, May.
I'm going to try to get to the 4 other people who have their hand up now. So if you don't have your hand up now, don't raise it, because that's all the time we have. And Joe Safdie is next.
Great reading, you two. The best Zoom reading I've ever been to. This was really wonderful. So just building off that last answer, Rachel and Norman, the common thread that I saw in your readings was that both of you seem to have a horror of the poem as artifact, and that you were really trying your hardest to avoid that fate. And yet, of course, as you say, Rachel, it's a paradox, because there you go, words on the page. What are you going to do with it? So I wanted if you could both talk about that paradox a bit more for you.
Well, I could say where I started with it. I can't say where I finished with it. I started in part with a feminist critique, if this doesn't sound like feminist critique, of the use of the female figure in poetry. And once you start with that, you pull a thread that is a very large thread. If you're not familiar with that because you don't know the history of poetry, just think of the nude in art. The female nude, which would be what it was. And thinking of that, you start thinking of poetry as a system where aesthetic pleasure has been defined in certain ways, and participation in those ways has continued throughout poetry. And so gender is very genders of all sorts, but I started with the female, is extremely important to poetry. It's kind of a secret topos. So you start thinking of other topoi, sort of other conventions, if you will, of statement and of presentation that you don't want to participate in, or that you want to resist, or that you want to partially participate in, and so on. And that's where I started with the thought that that writing is a form of critique, and that to make that critique, you have to have some understanding of what it is that you're resisting. I think I'll stop there.
That's really well said, and right. So Joe, I don't know that when you said we both of us are against the poem as artifact, I don't know that that's true for me, but I certainly am not interested in the poem that is the conventional poem with all the many problems and many more that Rachel just emphasized. So yes, somehow over all these years, you just have a sense of what you're trying to do in writing, and you know that it's not what the poem has been before. But for me, I feel like what I'm doing is in continuity with something very ancient, in poetry. I did a big study of Hebrew Psalms, which is very, very early form, early poetry in our culture. And so I feel like, in a way, insofar as the Psalms are artifacts, my poems are artifacts, or I don't have anything against artifacts. I'm not trying to make, monuments or something like that, but one way or the other, it doesn't. The idea of whether a poem is an artifact or not doesn't sort of ring true for me either way. I don't care, really, one way or the other. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Tom Mandel.
This was a great reading. I'll agree with, I think Joe or somebody said in the chat that it was the best, Pierre, that it was the best Zoom reading he'd been to. And I have to agree. Both your parts. And I don't really have much more to say than that, to tell you the truth, other than to just thank you so very much and appreciate the both of you and the opportunity to be in this world and write in this world with you is a joy. The question what poetry is, we can ask what artificial intelligence is, but we cannot ask what poetry is. That is to say, you can see what poetry is. We see what word it comes from. Something made out of language is poetry. That's all it is. But it's only when it becomes an experience that it is interesting to talk about, to write. And that experience, it's a little bit like what Eric Dolphy said about music. I think after it's over, it's gone in the air. You can never recapture it again. So that reading is gone now, despite YouTube. But the poetry that made it up is not gone. I know it will stay with me as it has come to me before this reading from both of you. And well, I don't know, I think I'm just rambling. Thank you so very much for that. It really was really, really great reading.
So glad you're here, Tom. Thanks.
Can I ask, can poetry be predictive? Like artificial intelligence, like that's one of the main reasons, is that it's predictive.
Well, yes, sometimes it can be. It's
Can
sort
I-
of like
can I-
any
Question.
writing could be.
By predictive, do you mean prophetic?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Okay, that's what I meant.
that word. I am using the word predictive in a mathematical sense, in a non, I don't know, a nothing sense. But I just, the question struck me as he was talking. Artificial intelligence, like one of its main reads is that it is predictive, not just analytic, not just data centric, but predictive. And I truly believe that in like what was just said, like poetry lives in the moment, like it is a present act, but reading it when it's after the moment is like a future act. So I don't know what I'm asking. I'm just asking it.
I appreciate. I want to get back to the questioners that were in line, which is Trace Peterson is next. Yeah.
On Zoom.
How do I unmute myself? Does this work?
You are unmuted.
Yeah, you're
Great.
unmuted.
That was an amazing reading, Norman and Rachel. Thank you both so much for that. I have questions for both of you, but my sort of more urgent question is for Rachel. There was one line that you had that was very moving, and I don't remember it exactly. I don't want to misquote it, but it was something about like, you know, I found everything I found, or I wrote in a way that was beautiful and pleasurable, and I pursued that, and then I found it was not not enough for what I was called to do, so I changed my mind.
Yeah,
that was so beautiful. What was that, and what section was that from?
That was in Meant to Say, where I
Great one.
I meant to create the kind of beauty that was not beautiful in the way I did not want. That left me without much of what I was once meant to do, which is a gender remark in a way, except I was once meant to embody that beauty so that other people could write about it. I mean, that's a very coarse approximation, and there have been other more subtle ways, but at that point I was not being subtle. So at any rate, so I had to change my mind. And you know,
it's something really beautiful articulation of limit that just sort of surfaced out of what was happening. Yeah.
But it's also trying to get beyond the limit of what, I mean, you know, it doesn't matter to me whether something is beautiful. It actually does matter if it's not so much an artifact, but a made thing. Like it really has, it has its own autonomous authenticity and necessary shape. And that shape can be anything. It doesn't have to be a, you know, it doesn't have to be a sonnet or something already fixed by the past. It can be something different. But one of the things that's so strange is one should create an interesting object that doesn't have to be beautiful in the way that people used to evoke beauty. It's so beautiful, and that that's the force of the word beauty in that citation, in that passage that you cited. But thank you.
And Rachel, what book is that in?
Well, it's in the selected poems that was just published.
Okay, I'll just get the selected poems.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I mean, if you really want, you know, let's go to it. It's actually in the final book of drafts, which
great. Okay.
These things are still available, and all I can say is I would love it if somebody published all of drafts, but it doesn't look like they're going to do it that easily. It's a lot of poem. It's actually like publishing, you know, Ron's alphabet. It's about the same length.
Maximus.
Yeah. It's just, that wasn't even an advert. It was just a thing to say. It's very hard to get. These things are out of scale. They're a little long, most of them. Don't ask why. They just are. I can have all sorts of reasons, but they're not going to be that interesting in a short talk. What did you want to ask Norman? Trace.
Oh, Norman, I wanted to ask you about when I was listening to you read this time, it occurred to me that certain poems, this theme kept coming up through certain poems, it felt a little bit like sort of painting with deictics and pronouns, that there's kind of a feeling of like inhabiting things and not being, and then you're not there and you're paradoxically a bunch of different places. But so when it comes to inhabiting the work, either as a writer or as a reader, it feels very paradoxical, and that's very moving. I found that very moving. But I was wondering how you might react to an expression like that of painting with deictics and pronouns. Is that something that you would see yourself as doing?
First, it's nice to see you, Trace.
Good, you too. Yeah.
Yes, what you said sounds intriguing, and I would say it does sound like it pertains to what I'm doing. Both the question of paradox and the idea of, you know, not being there exactly, being there but not being there, something like that, and then painting with deictics and pronouns. Yes, that rings true. In many of the poems, I'm obsessed with pronouns, and which seems so strange to me. You know, like I always say to people, isn't it amazing that I think I'm me and you think you're me? You? What? Who? You know, it's like I say I, and it's confusing. Like you say I also. What is this? This always strikes me as very bizarre, and the whole question. Of course, I'm always writing about the whole question of identity and who does anybody think they are, and how do the words enact that or not. So all of that is, yeah, it was a wonderful way that you put it. So yes, thank you for that characterization. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to have a final question from Nathanson.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. So first of all, thanks, Rachel and Norman, for absolutely terrific readings, everybody said, and thanks to Charles and CHAX for publishing the work so beautifully. I was thinking, Norman, a long time ago, that you have an essay, so you want to make something out of it, you know, Zen and the artistic impulse. And I think I think the image is unpiling. You talk about, usually we spend a lot of time piling stuff up, and poetry is a kind of unpiling. So then I was thinking, oh, actually, that's a great description of Rachel's work. There's a tremendous amount of unpiling going on. And then I was thinking that actually in both of your works, there's also a bunch of piling going on. So my question would be sort of, what does the act of piling feel like, or what's it doing in an atmosphere that's largely an atmosphere of unpiling? Because you're also piling stuff up, both of you.
Yeah, that question depends on that we all agree on what the notion of piling involves. Okay, so it's your metaphor, and therefore I might or might not hit the spot by saying it, but I really think of the long poem, and my work is the draft is really a long poem in episodes, as addressing everything, and everything becomes, as I've said in a book that'll come out, is like a technical term of wanting to absorb everything: politics, imagery, autobiography, let's say. I mean, think about the cantos. And if you do everything, if that's your unbelievable and implausible and impossible notion, it's like a Gesamtkunstwerk. You know, everything is the Gesamt, the totality of it, not a totalization, but an everything. Okay, you've got to indulge in a lot of piling, and often people who do that work have ways of sorting. They're overwhelmed. They might be overwhelmed. That, I think, plethora is a big deal. Or they invent their own. They learn what their own mechanisms are, and you see that in Mackey and Nate Mackey's work. And you know, there are other ways of addressing the piling, and it really goes back to what Joe said about the artifact. I think it was Joe anyway. Do you want an artifact or do you not want an artifact? And you know, to make an artifact adequate, to your notion of everything or the piling. Obviously, or, excuse me for that word, takes some unpiling also, because otherwise, it's completely nutty. You can't do it. It's really something that you have in your mind that you're going to do that you can't do. So you have to unpile a bit to get there, and back and forth like that. It's really, you're making, this is where, Tom was saying, it's poesis. You're constructing, you're making, you're inventing, you're making a shape in space. And that's the piling.
Yeah.
I disappeared there for a while, so I'm afraid I missed most of what Rachel said, but I'm not going to reflect on what she said because I missed most of it. But if piling means the accumulation of knowledge and understanding about the world, then there's not that much piling in my work, because my work is kind of like erasing, or it's really always about doubt. I mean, like, are these words really here? Are we here? What's happening? Is anything happening? It's confusing. I mean, I'm literally in a state of like radical confusion about what is going on here and whether I'm even here. What's life and death? I don't even know, So I have nothing to say or to offer, in terms of information and knowledge. I have no idea what's going on in the world. I don't have any, there's not much, to me, it seems like there's not a whole lot of piling in my work. It's mostly a reaction in the immediate moment of writing, that's what it is mostly. So I don't.
I shouldn't say it, but I'll just say that doesn't account for the fact that, at least for me, your work is intensely consoling.
Yes, I would hope for that. I would hope for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Charles Bernstein had a great, long ago, he blurbed one of my books, and he said something like that I always really appreciate. He said something like that these poems neither confront nor deny, but they offer company along the way. And I think that's the truth, that is my intention. I'm not trying to, deny anything. I'm not trying to offer anything or say anything, but in the poem, I am really connected to everybody who ever spoke the language, right? And so I feel everybody's presence there, and I want to be, with everyone in the poem. And I feel that. So that's what I'm trying to do more than anything. I think that's the best thing I ever saw about what I'm trying to do, that statement of Charles.
I think here on the edge of everything and on the edge of no thing or doubt is the time to say goodnight and to thank everyone for being a part of this. What a beautiful.
See everybody. Thank you so much, Rachel. Wonderful to hear that stuff. It was great. And I do have the book so I could follow along, and it made it really nice. Get that book. Get this one. So
get them both.
This is
and thank you, Norman.
And if I can just put in one plug, I'm reading again. Oh, that's an old book. That's a great old book. I'm reading again on the 14th, which is a Wednesday at the same time, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and it's a Wednesday. I'm reading with John High, and I have a new book that's just out called Men in Suits. It'll be a totally different reading. It has nothing like anything I read here. So if you're free on that day, come on and have some fun at a reading on the 14th. The only trouble is that we're going to start the reading with a half an hour of silence. So if you don't want to sit there in silence for half an hour, come at 5:30 or 8:30.
Too much.
Yeah. Tom, you can't come at 5. Don't come at 5. You have to come at 5:30.
Hey, listen, I can be as quiet as anybody else.
I want to see that. I want to see.
Have you just put Norman, it's easy. Just have to put something in your ears. I just want to say one last thing, talking about poetry. I remember for a long time I studied with Hannah Arendt, and one of the things she used to say that a poet was a companion. And
Yeah.
so, and I've always sort of kept that thought with me. And so
Yeah.
if we ask what is poetry, well, it's companionship.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Hey, good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you for doing this. Thank
You
you,
guys.
Goodbye.
everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
for coming.
everyone.
What a treat.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.